Okay, forced discipline can only carry kids so far. At some point, you have to give the learning process back to your kid. And when they accept it, that is self discipline. It looks like a kid who doesn't need to be reminded every 5 minutes, a kid who doesn't need somebody standing over them, a kid who wants to learn, who wants to practice, who wants to get better because they're genuinely curious about what they're capable of. That's what you're trying to create. But how do you do that? How does the kid go from needing you to control the process to controlling it themselves? What actually changes inside of them at the moment they choose? Because most parents can feel when it's not transferring, they just can't explain why. So today, I want to show you what's happening inside your child at the exact moment self-discipline either takes hold or doesn't. My name is Scott. I spent 35 years watching this transfer happening and watching it fail. So let's get into it. Now, forced discipline has an expiration date, and most parents don't even realize it until it's too late. Because what I watched over and over for 35 years was parents who got so comfortable being parents and being in control that they never handed that process back to their kid. They kept making decisions for them, kept solving all the problems for them, kept steering everything. And they thought they were doing a great job because the kid always behaved. He's a good kid, so. And I'll give you an example. I had a student I trained from the time he was 3 until the time he graduated. He was really talented. He was great at band, genuinely gifted. But when it came time to think about college, he wasn't sure music was what he wanted to do with his life. He didn't really understand how he was going to make a living at it. He hadn't figured that out yet. And that's okay. He's 18. He's supposed to be figuring that out. So I told his mom, let that boy make his own decisions. Let him take a year off, work with his dad, think it through, figure out what he actually wants. They didn't listen. They pushed him to pursue a music scholarship, and he got one. A scholarship he wasn't even sure he wanted. He barely made it through the first semester. They pushed him to go back a second, said that was normal for everybody. So he failed, lost the scholarship, then told him, I don't think that's what I want to do with my life. So there was time wasted, there was money wasted, and the kid felt like he let down his parents. And the parents panicked because now their son had no direction, and they realized he had never been the one steering. They had the whole time. That's what happens when forced discipline doesn't expire. The kid's going to leave anyway. Growing up is not something a parent permits, it just happens. The only question is whether your child is ready when it does, and the only way they're ready is if you transferred the process before your time ran out. Now, ultimately, I don't care if parents listen to me or not at my school. My kids are grown, they're doing well. My job is to tell people the thing I know. But people are going to do whatever they want to do, which is also part of discipline that I'll explain in just a bit. Now, from here on out, you need to know that I'm going to be talking about life skills because that's what discipline actually builds. Discipline is the learning process, and life skills are what you're teaching through that process. Like if your child is rude, that's a problem. That's a courtesy problem. If your child lies, that's an honesty problem. If your child throws a fit when they don't get what they want, that's a self-control problem. So if you're spending all your time correcting behaviors, you're spending zero time building the life skill that would fix the behavior. So stop telling your kids what you don't want. Start telling them what you do want. That's what life skills are for, and it's what I did for a living. So what do you actually want for your child? And don't say a well-behaved kid. What does that even mean? I mean, you want a kid who's courteous, a kid who tells the truth, a kid who can control themselves when they don't get what they want. Those are all attached to life skill. That's what you want. Your kid doesn't want those things, not yet. Right now, your kid just wants a cookie. And if you don't give them what they want right now, tantrum time. Now that collision happens in lots of houses every single day. You're focused on a life skill that'll serve them for the rest of their life, and they're focused on what feels good in the next 5 minutes. And that collision isn't a problem, that's the whole game. Because the transfer to self-discipline happens at one very specific moment. It happens when the life skill becomes the want. When your child isn't choosing honesty because you'll catch the lie. When they're choosing honesty because being honest matters more to them than avoiding the discomfort. When they start valuing honesty. And whatever a person values more influences what they want. The life skill won. Not because you were standing there because they wanted it more. And until that shift happens, you're still using forced discipline. So the question for you as a parent is, how do I get my child to want the life skill more than anything else? Now the simple answer is, you make the life skill stronger by letting your kid choose it, not by choosing it for them. You can't lecture self-discipline into a kid. You can explain a life skill 1,000 times, but knowing about courtesy is not the same as choosing courtesy when it costs you something. That choice happens at what I call a pivot point. A pivot point is the moment a decision is made. It almost always comes down to one or two options. Am I gonna do this or am I not gonna do this? That's pretty much it. You only get two directions. And your child is standing right in the middle of them. What influences which direction they'll go? Whatever is strongest inside them at that moment. Here's what that looks like. Let's say your kid walks up to you and says, "Can I have a cookie?" Now most parents would say yes or no and then move on. But what if you're currently kind of working with courtesy, working with your child on courtesy? You look down, their socks are on the living room floor. Instead of saying, "Go pick up your socks," you ask them a question. Is leaving your socks on the floor nice to the rest of the family? Is that a great example of being courteous? The kid says no. And you say, "Then why would I give you a cookie?" The kid goes, you wouldn't. That's right. So how can you fix this? Well, I could pick up my socks. Well, if you do that, I'd have no reason to not give you a cookie, would I? Now look at what just happened. Your child identified the principle. They recognized the problem. They came up with a solution. Not you. They did that. That's where self-discipline gets built. It's not in a lecture. It's in a decision. But here's where most parents get in their own way. They skip the pivot point. They say, "Pick up your socks, then you can have a cookie." The socks get picked up. It's the same result on the outside, but it's completely different on the inside of the kid. The child didn't decide anything. The parent solved the problem. The child obeyed. That's not really self-discipline. That's dependency. And dependency is what I watched for 35 years. Parents solving problems their kids needed to solve because it was faster or it was easier, because they didn't realize that the decision was the lesson. Don't just spend time with your kid. Use time. Take the time to teach your kids. So here's what's actually happening inside your child through this process. And I want to walk you through it because I don't think most parents have ever heard it explained this way. It starts with forced discipline. You taught your child a life skill. You explained what courtesy is. You showed them what it looks like. You expected them to practice. That was you doing the work. Then you started creating pivot points, moments where they had to choose, and they started making decisions, some good, some bad, but they were choosing. And here's what happens through those repeated choices. Your child starts to understand the life skill, not just know about it, they understand it. And there's a difference. Knowing about something like honesty means you can tell me the definition of the word. Understanding honesty means you've chosen it enough times in enough situations or context that you felt what it cost and you've seen what it builds. You lived it. And when your child understands a life skill at that level, something changes. They start to value it. Not because you told them to, because they experienced it enough times to see that it matters. And when they value it, it becomes a want. Not your want for them, their want for themselves. That's the transfer. That's the transfer. Forced discipline to pivot points, to repeated decisions, to understanding, to value, to want. That's the path. At the beginning of that path, your child tells the truth because you're in the room. At the end of that path, your child tells the truth because they want to be honest. Nobody has to watch them or remind them or force them. Now I watched this happen on my floor. I had students who started because their parents made them. They showed up because they had to. They trained because I was standing right there. And then one day, something changed. A student would stay after class to work on a technique that nobody taught them or assigned them. They'd ask a question that I hadn't prompted. They'd correct themselves before I even opened my mouth. That was the moment the principle stopped being mine and it became theirs. And once it became theirs, I couldn't have stopped it if I wanted to. That's self-discipline. It's not powered by your authority. It's powered by what your child has learned to value. So let me be real clear about what your job actually is, because a lot of parents get this wrong. A lot of parents think their job is to be their kid's buddy, to make sure their kid likes them, to keep things smooth, to avoid the hard conversations because you don't want to damage the relationship. That is not your job. That's you protecting yourself from discomfort. And your kid pays for it because a buddy doesn't teach life skills. A buddy doesn't create pivot points. A buddy doesn't hold the line when the kid pushes back. Buddy just makes things easy, and easy doesn't build anything. Now, other parents think their job is to control everything, every decision, every outcome, every move. That's not your job either. That's the music scholarship boy. That's 18 years of forced discipline with no transfer. Your job sits somewhere between those two failures. Your job is to build life skills into your child so that when they leave your house, they have something inside them that works without you. And the way you do that is a system. You watch your child's behavior, and instead of reacting to it, you ask a question. What is this behavior telling me my child needs to learn? That question changes everything, because now you're not chasing after behavior. That's a byproduct of something that they're missing. You're identifying the life skill behind the behavior. And once you see the life skill, you teach it. You explain it so they can understand it. You demonstrate it so they can see it. You create pivot points so they can practice choosing it. And when they choose it, you reward that choice. When they reject it, you correct or even punish that choice. And you run the process over and over again across as many real situations and contexts as you can while you still have influence. That's the system. That's your job, not to be their buddy, not to control their life, to build what goes inside of them. Now here's what all this comes down to. You have a window. From the time your child is born until they start going through puberty, that is your greatest opportunity to build life skills in them. I'm not saying it's impossible after that, but it gets significantly harder, because during the teenage years, your role changes, whether you're ready for it or not. You stop being the director and you start becoming kind of a guide. You're no longer telling them what to choose. You're helping them think through the choices they're already going to make on their own. And if you haven't built the life skills before that shift happens, you're going to be guiding a kid who has nothing inside them to guide them back to. That's the panic I watch parents go through. Their teenagers started making bad decisions and the parents had no foundation to point back to, or they would just deny there was a problem. They'd been managing behavior for 13 years instead of building life skills. So the goal is this: by the time your child hits that shift, they should already know what they're choosing between. Not just, am I going to get in trouble, but am I going to be honest or dishonest? Am I going to be responsible or irresponsible? Am I going to be courteous or am I going to be selfish? Your child should recognize those pivot points. They should have practiced making those decisions, and you should be stepping back because they're ready now. You built it into them. You gave them repeated opportunities to choose it, and now it's theirs. Now, if you're watching your child right now and you feel like they'd fall apart without you standing over them, that's not a discipline problem. That is a transfer problem. And the answer isn't more control. The answer is pivot points. Decisions your child makes, not decisions that you make for them. So start now, because the window does not stay open forever. And the kids who leave home without this spend years trying to figure out what no one helped them build. Now next, I'm going to show you how to break discipline down into something you can actually build piece by piece. My name is Scott Wilkinson. I'm a martial arts instructor. Subscribe to Foundations of Character, share it with some friends, and I will see you next time.